Welcome everyone, Costin here on Serious Gaming. The European Union's Parliament has adopted a copyright directive, including Article 11 and Article 13, the so-called link tax with Article 11 and the upload filter with Article 13. But what is this really all about? What's driving this legislative push in order to understand exactly where we stand and what this is all about? Well, I think The Guardian, who is more or less bent on supporting this or writing articles in favor of this, has a perfect title. European Union copyright law may force tech giants to pay billions to publishers. Legislation opposed by firms like Facebook and Google and groups warning of detrimental consequences for the internet. This is what this is about. With Article 11, it's about the news aggregators fighting media organizations, including The Guardian, because media organizations would like a cut of the money that news aggregators like Google make, or even like Facebook. The so-called link tax comes into play here. With Article 13, you have the music industry wanting to screw over YouTube. The problem, though, is when you have legislation that is being enacted that basically is about fights between Google and music industry or media organizations versus Facebook and Google, then you end up with legislation that screws over the entirety of the internet. And this is the problem. This is not tailored specific to those particular battles, though it is about those particular battles. The problem is the members of the European Parliament, who have no fucking clue what this is all about, have just voted to screw over the internet as we know it. I'll explain in great detail as to why that is, but you need to understand what's driving this. And here's the thing, some people might look at this votes, well, they did amend Article 11 and 13, but here's the problem. The legislation that was voted by the European Parliament is not the final version. Just like when you have, in the United States, you have a piece of legislation pushed by the House of Representatives, then you have the same legislation but with modification is pushed by the Senate. The two houses need to meet, the Senate and the House need to meet and iron out their differences. They go to conference and they negotiate and then reach a final version. Same situation here. There are various parts, various branches of the legislative process with regards to the European Union, and they are going to conduct negotiations behind closed doors. Now, this is something that typically happens in most democracies when you have differences between different chambers. The problem here is, although the legislation wouldn't be as horrible with some of the changes they've made, you can be damn certain that the person that's going to negotiate this behind closed doors, the person that was pushing the original version of Article 11 and Article 13, is not going to negotiate in good faith on behalf of these changes. And it's very likely even that what we end up getting is not the amended version of this copyright directive with the amended versions of Article 11 and 13, but the original versions, which are worse. Not that what they've done is good, to be clear, but the original version is worse. So let me go back to that Guardian article and read for him. Music companies, filmmakers, and media publishers could be in line for billions in payouts after European Union lawmakers voted to accept controversial changes to copyright rules that aim to make tech companies, including Facebook and Google, share more of their revenue. The proposed legislation that surfaced 2 years ago with the aim to update copyright for the digital age has unleashed a ferocious lobbying war pitting the likes of Paul McCartney and others against Silicon Valley giants and their respective supporters, including internet pioneer Tim Berners-Lee and Wikipedia founder Jimmy Wales. On Wednesday, the European Parliament voted to approve amended versions of the Copyright Directive, two most controversial provisions, Article 13 and 11. A total of 438 lawmakers voted for the amended copyright proposals to be adopted, with 226 against and 39 abstentions. The two articles had been rejected by the European Parliament when it voted on the draft legislation in July. Article 11, which critics have dubbed a link tax, would force news aggregation and search sites such as Google and Facebook to pay publishers for showing news snippets or linking to news stories on other sites. Europe's biggest news agencies have urged MEPs to vote for the law as they accuse Google and Facebook of plundering the news and their ad revenues, resulting in a threat to democracy. Article 13 would make platforms such as YouTube seek licenses for content such as music videos, which are to say will allow them to properly negotiate better royalties. This is a great day for European Union creators. And obviously, critics claim the proposal will destroy the internet, spelling the end of sharing holiday snaps or memes on Facebook. Wikipedia shut down its pages in some countries in protest at the plans, which it claims would force the closure of its user-generated encyclopedia. Berners-Lee is among 70 internet luminaries to oppose the law, arguing it would transform the internet from an open platform into a tool for automated surveillance and control. And this is the guy that helped build the internet. This is one of the founders of the internet. Proponents have been exasperated by such claims described by German Christian Democrat MEP Axel Voss, who led the introduction of the legislation as spin on behalf of tech giants that's totally wrong and fake news. It's not wrong and it's not fake news. Unlike Axel Voss, who is spinning in bullshit on behalf of the music industry, there are people who know better, including, I don't know, people that built the internet as we know it, people that created the internet, people that contributed greatly to the internet being as it is. So what's the issue at stake here? What's the problem? Well, beyond the fact that you have widespread changes being brought on the internet just because the music industry and the media organizations want to spat with Facebook and YouTube, and they want to win that because that's what it boils down to. That's what this is all about. But they're going to screw us over because of what they're doing over here. But here's the problem. Let's say Article 11. What is Article 11 going to lead to? If you can't share news stories, if you can't share links, well, it's without having the platform holder paying royalties to the organizations that have the copyright control over those stories. Well, it's going to lead to restriction of information, which goes against the founding principles of the internet, which goes against the idea of the internet as it is. When we're speaking about the internet, Article 11 is a far bigger issue than Article 13 because it will lead to a restriction of information. One of the biggest problems that we're seeing right now in this day and age with the internet is that more and more countries are pushing for their own version of their internet, a more regional version with severe restrictions. You can look at countries like Russia, China, and Iran. Now, Europe, the so-called democracy that is the European Union, is also doing this with their own version of this. Now, it's already been done. You've already seen things like Article 11 done in places like Germany or in Spain, but it hasn't ended up working very well. And then you have Article 13. What Article 13 is more or less what we get with the Content ID system on YouTube as it is right now, but more restrictive and backed by the force of the law, whereas Content ID is something that YouTube itself pushed for on its own. When you have the law introduced in this, you can imagine that the restrictions will be worse. But it's not really going to affect YouTube too much as it is. It will, however, affect everyone else far more. Say goodbye to using custom forum avatars or posting pictures or sharing pictures, or hell, taking, like, apparently this is an issue, like if you take a picture of yourself in front of the building, because you don't own the rights to that building, you don't have the permission to actually post that picture. I know, it's nonsense across the board, or it's bullshit across the board. It's a bunch of horse crap that's only in favor of corporate interests, and that's going to screw over the internet as we know it. And that's assuming that these changes are even implemented the way that the creators envisioned them. Because here's the bigger issue, above all else. Above how these changes would affect the flow of information or the posting of copyright content, because as it is right now on the internet, if you upload something that's copyrighted that you don't own the rights to, the company that actually owns the rights to that can take it down, can force you to take it down under current European Union legislation. What this changes is that that the websites, the platform that you upload in advance has to get permission for you to even be able to upload that. You can imagine that's going to be a big problem. Can YouTube handle it? Can Google handle it? Can Facebook? Yes, but the internet is not Google, YouTube, and Facebook or Twitter. The internet is a far more than that, and we already have big issues as it is with these companies having too much power. And for all the talk about how this is going to limit their power, this is only going to increase their power, because many other websites will not have the resources or the inclination to actually deal with this nonsense. And then we're going to see the biggest negative outcome of all of this. In that, many websites outside of the European Union will either A, have to change significantly in order to accommodate the changes to European Union law, or more likely, we're going to see a repeat of the situation with the GDR, which is the data protection legislation that was passed by the European Union. What happened with the European GDR? Well, many websites from the United States outright restricted access to European users because they said, you know what? We don't want to deal with this. We don't want to have to deal with this. We don't want to spend the legal resources with this. And this is the biggest problem with the internet. You have this push for a more regional type of internet. Because, hey, screwing over the internet for the sake of the record labels, the music industry, and media organizations is a wonderful thing that's really going to help democracy and humanity. Or it's going to lead to information being controlled by those that already have very significant sway with regards to information. It's going to restrict information for people around the world, which is one of the biggest net benefits of the internet as we know it. And it's going to affect many websites on the internet. Will it be the end of the internet? No, but it will change the internet in a fairly significant and negative way. Now, for the music industry, they don't care about that. They just care about their spat with YouTube. For the news organizations, they just care about getting their fair share from Facebook. But it might not end going in that direction. It's more likely going to lead, very likely going to lead to a more restrictive internet. And what's exceptionally frustrating about all of this is that the people voting on this piece of legislation don't have any clue what the impact is going to be. This is actually one of the biggest problems with this campaign to save your internet, is that people haven't been able to make a really good argument as to what the problem is, what the impact will be of this legislation. Well, the impact is that when you upload something on the internet, you may not be able to upload something on the internet because of this legislation. It might be that many websites get significant parts of them restricted or outright restricted within the European Union. It might be because it will lead to a more regional internet, not just in Europe, but across the world, which we are already seeing countries moving in that direction. It might be because the flow of information is going to be restricted in favor of traditional media. These are the major issues with Article 11 and Article 13. This is why they are such a disaster. Now, let me be clear. I'm no fan of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I think they are very powerful companies that do deserve to be taken down a notch. But this is not going to do that. This is not going to achieve that. In fact, if anything, it's going to entrench their power even more. And this is what happens when instead of just, having governments go after those particular companies, you have legislation that affects the entire internet, but that really was created because of the spat between Facebook, Google, Twitter, and news organizations or the record labels. That's what this is all about. Costin here on Serious Gaming signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video. If you do like my content, please do consider supporting me via PayPal and Patreon. I certainly will need it after what's been going on. Is there a way, one final note I like to make here. Is there a way to stop this from happening? Well, this is not the final vote. There's still negotiations between the various parts of the European Union legislative process, of course. And then European Union member states have to implement the law on a local level. They have to actually pass legislation on a local level. So this is far from over, and there are European Union parliamentary elections that are going to take place next year, just a few short months after this, after the final vote on this legislation. So things can change, but the way I'm seeing it, the campaign has not exactly done a great job at creating enough support to stop this from going into effect. So we'll see how all of this goes down. Costin here, signing out. Stay tuned for more.